By the mid-19th century, we've also developed urban planning. Earlier cities had no plan. They just started building stuff and then ran roads from one thing to another, which is why if you go look at, say, like ancient or Rome today, people say road maps look like spaghetti just dropped on a plate. But if you look at, say, New York City or Washington, D.C., there's a neatly laid out grid. Well, that's urban planning. One of the things that's going to come along with urban planning is parks, which are created for health, the idea that you need to get out of the factory, get out of the apartment and out into the open air. But it's also created for a place for the wealthy to escape from the city. And part of this is the influence of the old transcendentalist movement, which said that nature was where you went to seek enlightenment and to get in touch with your spirituality. The great name here is Frederick Law Olmsted, who, along with Calvert Vaux, designs Central Park in the late 1850s. This is when Central Park is invented. Now, Central Park is actually revolutionary because it is designed to look unplanned. If you walk through Central Park, it feels like it just happened naturally. It didn't. There used to be buildings there, and they tore them down, and they created a park. But the whole point of the park was to appear natural. Things like libraries, art galleries, natural history museums, theater, concert halls, opera halls. These would also all become considered to be vital parts of a city. So the city is becoming beyond functional. It's trying to become a place where you could live a nice, well-rounded, fulfilling life. The largest and best known of these museums, by the way, is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is, of course, in Central Park. If you've never been there, you really should go. If you can, I understand that. It's easier to say than do. And cities began to actually compete with each other in this way. Cities would try to have the best opera hall or the best museum or the best park. And this would become a great point of pride. A lot of this was done through wealthy patrons. We talked about Carnegie and the Gospel of Wealth. Well, he wasn't alone. A lot of these halls and public institutions are paid for by the industrialists who have made so much money in this economy. Cities also began to clear away old buildings and build new buildings. Many of these giant monumental buildings, we really get into massive towering architecture at this time. A great influence on all of this is the Chicago Columbian Exposition, which is set up to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Columbus. I'm sorry, the 400th anniversary of Columbus coming to America. But they miss it by a year. They do it in 1893. Daniel Burnham's Great White City, which you see pictures of here, which are these massive Greek-inspired monumental buildings made out of just bright white, would become a great inspiration and lead to something we call the City Beautiful movement. Formal layouts, large buildings, a real focus on open space, become foundational principles of how we build our cities. Washington, D.C. is part of this. You think about Smithsonian, the Capitol itself, the White House, which predates this, I should mention. But they're built in this style. There's the Metropolitan Museum of Art here on the top right, Grand Central Station. I live in Texas, and I just last week took my family down to San Antonio to see the Riverwalk and the Christmas lights on there. Well, that was part of City Beautiful, too. This idea that cities should be are kind of works of art. They're also going to use engineering to create new space by reclaiming it from water. Boston and Chicago, for example, will push back the ocean in Boston and the lake in Chicago to create new land to build on. And there's also a great wave of annexation of big cities closer to smaller cities. In 1898, New York annexes Brooklyn. Well, Brooklyn had been one of the largest cities in America all by itself, and then it just becomes part of Brooklyn. Just to real quickly tell you another great American story, here's another picture of the Chicago Exposition, and this is where the Ferris wheel is invented. Now, the whole point of the Ferris wheel was to build something more spectacular than what Paris had at their great exposition, which was the Eiffel Tower. Now, just so you understand what's going on here, the Ferris wheel, those are railroad cars that are being used. That's how big this thing is. But that was part of this whole competition. Come see what we have in our city. And this engineer built this thing, the Ferris wheel. Of course, if you're going to have a big city with all these people, they got to live somewhere. Well, the wealthy tended to live in mansions, and it's not like today where they probably live out on a hill somewhere outside of town. They lived right downtown. Fifth Avenue, which runs right through the heart of New York City, was lined with incredibly valuable mansions. Beacon Hill in Boston had some of the nicest and most expensive homes in the country. Lakeshore, Nob Hill. These were all very expensive neighborhoods filled with mansions in the middle of major American cities. The middle class could easily afford housing because labor was cheap, and if labor was cheap, construction is relatively cheap. The middle class is for the first time going to begin to move out of the city, and they're able to do this because of increases or improvements in public transportation. Trains and subways become invented, and so now you can live out far away and get into town for work and then return home at the end of the day. These were sold as pastoral escapes from the city. The city was beginning to be seen as a negative place to be, and you want to get away from it at night and go somewhere peaceful and calm.